my fear basically is that those in charge would reason that if uh, look what happens with their ideas about how to use their arms. We've talked a lot about that purity of arms nonsense, the dangerously suicidal, I guess, fealty or allegiance, perhaps commitment. It's the Shema Yisrael of these people. They would rather Yeharg Vel Yavor, and that's what they're doing. Yeharg Vel Yavor. Better that we get killed than to violate these principles that we discussed last week. One of the illogical conclusions, well, the conclusion, if they take their so-called logic to its ultimate conclusion, will be that, let's say, an enemy like whoever, we don't lack any enemies, decides that it's time to for them to try to attack us with all they got. Let's say they had a nuclear weapon, let's say, or something comparable, whatever it may be, a doomsday weapon. And they somehow launched it. They pressed the button. Now it's on its way to Eretz Yisrael. Would our misguided commanders and so-called leaders, or I'd say more like the regime, would they strike back? It used to be, in Cold War times, they talked about mutually assured destruction. The Soviets wouldn't want to nuke the United States, God forbid. Why? Because they knew that they would get the same thing in return. Okay? Mutual assured destruction, so they won't nuke us if we don't nuke them. And that's why even though we live in this tension for decades during the Cold War, we can assume that no one's going to be that crazy to bring this about. But when you deal with suicidally crazy people on one side who are just itching for the chance to do this, and on the other side, the people who are going to, and this is my fear, no reason, seeing that the A-bomb or whatever it is already on the way here, what will help us for us to use whatever we got to retaliate? We're already dead, and if we're already dead, what does it help us to kill them? So they wouldn't do it. So I'm afraid that aside from the fact that it's eminently clear that our enemies have mostly called I hate to say our, but it's unfortunate I'm so that's what the people who've been running the show have done. They've basically shown that they have no deterrent factor. They've shown that they have no intention to punish those who would attack them. So we're just setting ourselves up for even worse. Yeah, there would be there's someone who would say that, okay, we're already going down, so might as well. I don't understand why it is we haven't launched whatever it is we have. I guess I'm just not bright enough to understand how these things work. But I pray for a Jewish leader who around here would realize they're basically doing everything they can and they just keep upping it. They just keep upping it. So it's time for us to finally strike with everything we got and survive. Something else that I want to realize, Jewish survival mode seems to be genetic. That is, we've had it ingrained so much in ourselves. And when I say genetic, I don't mean that colloquially. I mean, perhaps just like certain factors in personality are inherited, of course, certain the whole nature nurture business, but it could be that just like we found that forms of the ability to self-control and intelligence and other matters of the mind are actually highly influenced by genetics. So you'll have a Jewish person has a tendency toward intelligence. So too, this survival mode mechanism that we've developed is actually encoded in our genes. So we don't fight, we don't win, we just cower, we survive. And it so happened that the Holocaust forced those of us who were alive then to consciously, actively overcome our natural tendencies. They knew that they were in survival mode, and that's what they're genetically predisposed to do. So they fought back. They fought to have a state. And this bore fruit until, let's say, the Yom Kippur War, where the people who are still scarred by the Holocaust were around. But now, because we are the Marshmallow generation, as I like to call us, living in the Orwellian era, because that's what we are. We're living in Orwellian times, where words don't mean what they used to mean. So because we're now, we have reverted. We're back to the way we are. We have a Jewish generation that, once again, has no will to fight. Moshe Rabbeinu sort of alluded to this, according to Rambam Memorial Nevuchim, as we discussed, why the generation that left Egypt had to die out, and a new generation had to be raised to fight. A new generation had to be made tough through living in the wilderness and subsisting. Tough times create stronger people. Okay, so we needed that. But now we've had weak people. We've gone back to this latent attitude that we've had. and we're just natural Jews. So it has a few manifestations here in today's society. In Haredism, let's say, among the Haredi political leadership and those people who actively want to be part of what they call Haredi communities, it is clear and it's explicit reversion to this diaspora survival mode. Okay? The only thing that's different is the location. Instead of being in Europe or whatever it is, now they are in Eretz Yisrael. Wow, things keep going in. Okay, so they never had, Haredism never had an MO to run the country or an army or a nation or do anything like that, and they only want to survive wherever they were, and that's what they're doing right now. So we're not expecting anything big to come from Haredi society in the near future. In secular circles, this is more covered up. They try to make excuses for this. The purity of arms and all that other nonsense. That's basically a way to hide, or let's say the peaceniks, et cetera, in Oslo. Basically everything that's their way to try to hide what they're actually feeling. Okay, so they really have no will to want to fight. That's what they're doing. So they hide it. They say, like, no, the excuses, we're trying to make peace and we believe in that, we want to minimize civilian casualties, we want to be better than them. It's all nonsense. And in the non-Haredite Orthodox world, this is most strongly represented, I believe, by Rev Lichtenstein, who we mentioned 2 weeks ago. If not only him, but people in those circles and of that belief. They're basically hiding in an emotional Judaism that seeks to take shelter in ritual and intellectual comfort zones. Judaism, gutless Judaism as we've practiced it, and also intense Talmud study. That's what they do in yeshiva. They're very scholarly, but they don't have a real urge to want to move ahead with Klal Yisrael consciousness, into what the rabbi refers to as redemption mode Judaism. And then they claim, by the way, that this attitude, this is our way, this is the Torah way, this is what we've been doing all along, this is our Masorah. Our Masorah is to be subservient and not to fight. It's kind of low on actual sources because it's in complete contradiction to the biblical and midrashic sources, but quasi-halachic justifications have always been used by basically all of us. So that's what you could expect. Bottom line, we've become what we always were. We just happen to be in Eretz Yisrael. So we need to learn once again how to fight, because we are Rahmanim Baishanim Gomle Chasadim. That seems to be genetic. And because of the Gullus, we're also not fighters. We don't stand up for ourselves or just do what needs to be done. And we like to make excuses. There's a few examples about this one. Everybody says, "Oh, it's not that you could say, I'm a guy like me. I'm not a successful businessman. I'm not rich because I don't want to be rich. No, maybe just because I don't know how to invest and I'm not that good at business. That's good. You could say you realize the situation and you could create an excuse after the fact. So that's basically what they're all doing. I hope that God gives us the power to realize how weak we are and to eventually fight back.